Hello and welcome to Science 101. My name is Jaime Allcorn and I'm here with Morgan Gozdor talking about the toxin benzene. So Morgan, what is benzene and what is it used for?
Benzene is used in large amounts to make other chemicals. These chemicals are used to make plastic, resins, nylon, and synthetic fibers. It's also used to make certain types of rubbers, lubricants, dyes, detergents, drugs, and pesticides. And sometimes it's used in things like paints, glues, and furniture racks.
Could you tell us a little bit more about its chemical structure and what class of toxin it is? Is it a persistent organic pollutant or is it a carcinogen or what exactly?
Benzene is an organic chemical compound with a chemical formula C6H6. 6 carbon atoms are joined each by a hydrogen atom and they just go together to form a ring. The molar mass of benzene is 78.11 grams per mole. Benzene's density is 876.5 kilograms per meters cubed. And benzene's melting point is 41.9 degrees Fahrenheit, while its boiling point is 176.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Benzene is classified as a carcinogen and also as an immune system depressant.
Now Morgan, how was this toxin introduced into the environment?
Benzene is introduced into the environment through the existence of gasoline, the use in the production of plastics, resins, nylon, synthetic fibers, rubbers, lubricants, dyes, detergents, drugs, pesticides, paint, glue, and furniture wax. This can lead to its being released into the environment through waste streams. It's also found naturally in volcanoes as a constitute of crude oil from forest fires, and it's also a plant volatile.
Is there any risk associated with benzene in the environment?
The risks associated with using benzene are low birth weight, delayed bone formation, and bone marrow damage to pregnant animals that breathe in benzene. For humans, over a long period of time, benzene can start to affect the blood. Harmful effects to the bone marrow and decrease in red blood cells leading to anemia can occur when exposed for a year or more. Excessive bleeding and decrease in the immune system are also common effects. And sometimes women who breathe in high levels of benzene for multiple months start to have irregular menstrual periods and their ovaries start to shrink.
Does benzene pose a threat to the safety of our environment in the present or the future? Why do you say that?
When released into the air at a vapor pressure of 94.8 mmHg, it will remain as a vapor in the ambient atmosphere. And the half-life to remove benzene with a photochemical produced hydroxyl radical is about 13 days. If it's released into soil, benzene is expected to have a high mobility. Volatilization half-life for a model river and model lake are around 2.7 hours and 3.5 days.
How long does benzene remain active in the environment?
Vapor phase benzene can be degraded in the atmosphere by reacting with a photochemical produced hydroxyl radical, and for this reaction to take place, the half-life is about 13 days. Benzene dissolved into deionized water saturated with air and exposed to sunlight has a half-life of about 16.9 days. Benzene is very water-soluble, and it can actually be removed from the atmosphere by rain. Using a base-rich para-brownish soil incubated for 10 weeks, benzene was 24% degraded in 1 week, 44% degraded in 5 weeks, and 47% degraded in 10 weeks. The half-life for a river model and model lakes are about 2.7 hours and 3.5 days.
Is benzene volatile and prone to moving into the air from soil or water, or vice versa?
Benzene is able to volatilize from dry soil surfaces at specific vapor pressures. The vapor pressure is about 94.8 mmHg, and it has to be 25 degrees Celsius. If released into soil, benzene is expected to have a high mobility based upon a KOC of 85. Volatilization from moist soil surfaces is expected to be an important fate process based upon the Henry's law constant of 5.56 times 10 to the negative 3 atm-Cu meters per mole. Benzene may volatilize from dry soil surfaces based upon its vapor pressure. If released into water, benzene does not absorb sediments or solids. Volatilization from water surfaces is expected to be an important phase process based upon the compound's Henry law constant.
How is benzene broken down, either by sunlight or other factors? Does it bind strongly to soil particles?
Benzene is broken down in the atmosphere by rain because it's very water soluble. Benzene does bind strongly to soil particles, but with water, it does not.
What habitats or species are most affected by it? How does benzene display its effects?
Humans are most affected by benzene. This is because humans work in industrial settings that use benzene to help make other chemicals. And so working for a long period of time at these places, you're exposed to benzene so much and in such high quantities that the effects are really, really harmful. Exposure to benzene is clearly linked with leukemia. Other neoplastic conditions that are associated with an increased risk in humans are hematologic neoplasms, blood disorders such as alloplastic anemia, and Hodgkin's lymphoma and myelodysplasia syndrome. Benzenes increase the risk of cancer in multiple species at multiple organ sites also. Other species affected by benzene are those that we use to test the effects of benzene on. So these include mice, larvae, and blue crab. Mice show a 30% mortality when exposed to benzene compared to a 12% mortality from a control group. It increases DNA synthesis in mice and also reduces the cellularity of bone marrow and number of stem cells. Larvae show a delayed in development of eggs, decrease in feeding and growth, and an increase in respiration when exposed to benzene. And blue crab showed that they needed more time to complete a molt cycle when exposed to benzene. So normally it takes a blue crab about 33 days to molt, but when exposed to benzene it took them 50. I'm here with Jaime Allcorn to discuss the exposure, laws, and substitutes for benzene. Hello, Jaime.
Hi, Morgan.
So, for benzene exposure, what are the symptoms of exposure?
The most common symptoms for exposure are a sore throat, dizziness, drowsiness, and that's for like short-term effects, and those are the most immediate. And then also irregular heartbeat, confusion, unconsciousness, tremors, and sometimes death. And now that depends on the concentration that you are exposed to. And then ingesting benzene in foods or drinks can cause vomiting, stomach irritation, dizziness, drowsiness, convulsions, irregular heartbeat, and death as well.
Oh, wow.
Also depending on your concentration. Long-term exposure, which is determined for over a year or longer, can affect your bone marrow and cause anemia and excessive bleeding. It can also affect your immune system and increase your chance of infection, and can cause irregular menstrual cycles in women along with a decrease in size of ovaries.
I see.
It's a shame. Most people that suffer high concentrations of benzene over either a long length of time or sometimes even a short can suffer from leukemia, and most cases of leukemia are acute, which is like the most common that benzene causes. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, so for exposure, what are the approximate toxic or lethal doses of the toxin? And what is the toxicity of the contaminant under standardized conditions?
Well, the lethal oral dose, if you ingest benzene through your food or drink, is estimated to be 10 milliliters if it's a drink, or 9 to 30 grams if it's food. Inhaling benzene vapor can, for like 5 to 10 minutes in a concentration that's higher than 20,000 ppm or more, can be lethal. And 500 ppm is considered to be dangerous to your health or your life. So try not to be exposed to that much.
Oh, yes, I will avoid that. Are some life stages, older or younger, more sensitive to benzene than others?
Young people are more sensitive to benzene than older people are because benzene toxicity is mostly passed down from mothers to offspring. And so younger kids, since their immune systems and their body systems aren't as mature as older adults, are more affected, and therefore they suffer more of the symptoms than older people do.
So, are its effects synergistic or antagonistic with those of other environmental contaminants? Moving on to laws, what regulations or laws exist, to control this?
Well, people who run a car or motor vehicle must notify the National Response Center immediately if a release of 20 pounds or equivalent to 4.54 kilograms of benzene is released into the atmosphere. And then any solid waste containing benzene may be considered a hazardous waste if it contains any residue, contaminated soil, or water or other debris from a spill cleanup, and must be treated as a hazardous waste. If benzene is a spent solvent, it must be considered a hazardous waste from a non-specific source and must be treated as such. And it's designated as a hazardous air pollutant under Section 112 of the Clean Air Act, and it is regulated as a hazardous substance. It's also designated as a hazardous substance under Section 311B, Section 2, and then A of the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, and is regulated further by the Clean Water Act of both 1977 and 1978. The regulations of these acts apply to discharges of benzene, such as any types of isomers, hydrates, solutions, or mixtures. And the EPA dictates that the maximum level of benzene found in community or non-community drinking water systems is 0.005 milligrams per liter or lower.
Must be lower.
And then states further regulate this, and the regulations for each state vary.
I see. What are some substitutes for benzene?
Well, one substitute in particular is called toluene. It's otherwise known as methylbenzene, and it contains a methyl side group that metabolizes differently than benzene, which means that it won't cause cancer like benzene does, which is what makes it a better alternative. It is found mostly in glues and adhesives, but is also used in the production of paints, dyes, detergents, pharmaceuticals, and plastics. It's still irritating to the eyes and skin of people, and your contact with it should still be limited.
A good substitute, though.
It is. It really is.
Well, that's all for today.
Thanks for having me, Morgan.
Thanks for coming.